The day my brother signed my name on a document that wasn't his to touch, he was smiling. I know because I was watching through the glass panel of the conference room door, and I remember thinking, he looks exactly like our grandfather used to look when he was proud of something. That was the last time I felt anything close to tenderness toward him. My name is Claire. I'm 32 years old. I'm a licensed structural engineer. I live alone, and until 14 months ago, I believed that family was the one thing in this world that didn't need a contract to hold it together. I was wrong about that, but I was right about almost everything else. Let me take you back to the beginning, because the ending only makes sense if you understand how long this had been building. My grandfather, I called him Papa Joe, built his house with his own hands in 1974. Not metaphorically, he actually built it. He was a carpenter before he was anything else, and the house in Asheville, North Carolina, sat on 2 acres of land he'd paid for with 40 years of calluses and early mornings, 4 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, a workshop in the back where he taught me how to read a level when I was 7 years old. He used to say, "Claire Bear, if something isn't level, everything built on top of it will eventually fall." I think about that a lot now. Papa Joe passed away 3 winters ago. He was 81, and he went the way he wanted, in his own bed, in his own house, with the windows open. He left a will. It was clear, it was notarized, and it had been filed with his attorney for 11 years. The house and the land went to me. A cash sum and his tools went to my brother, Damon. Papa Joe loved Damon. But he also knew Damon. He once told me, very quietly, the Christmas before he got sick, the house needs someone who'll take care of it, not someone who'll sell it. He knew. Damon is 4 years older than me. Growing up, he was the one who got the benefit of the doubt. The second chance, the he means well. He's charming in the way that certain people are charming. It works on you until it doesn't. And once it stops working, you wonder how it ever did. He married a woman named Renee 6 years ago. Renee has opinions about money, the same way some people have opinions about religion. Constantly, loudly, and with total certainty that she's right. The two of them had been struggling financially. I knew this. It wasn't a secret. Damon had gone in on a restaurant venture that collapsed 18 months after it opened, and they'd taken out a second mortgage on their house to cover the losses. I'd lent him $20,000 2 years prior, which he had not paid back. I want to be clear that I'm not telling you this to be cruel. I'm telling you because it matters to understanding what came next. After the will was filed and the probate process began, things were fine for about 4 months. Then Renee started calling me. The first call was soft. She mentioned that the house was sitting empty, and wasn't it a shame? And wouldn't it make sense for them to move in while I figured out what I wanted to do with it? I said I wasn't going to sell it. She said, of course. She was just saying. The second call was less soft. She'd done some research, she said. She had a cousin who was a real estate agent, and the property was worth somewhere between $400,000 and $430,000 depending on the market. Wasn't that incredible? Didn't I want to use that money for something? I was single. I was renting an apartment in Charlotte. Wouldn't it be smart to liquidate the asset? I told her the house wasn't an asset. It was Papa Joe's house. She laughed like I'd said something childish. The third call never came. What came instead was a letter from a title company I'd never heard of, informing me that a deed transfer had been initiated on the property at Papa Joe's address, listing Damon and Renee as the new owners and requesting my signature notarization confirmation within 30 days. I read that letter 3 times. Then I sat very still for about 2 minutes. Then I called my attorney. Her name is Margaret Osei, and she's been practicing real estate law in North Carolina for 19 years. When I read her the letter over the phone, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Claire, do not respond to that letter. Do not contact your brother. Come to my office tomorrow morning." I came to her office the next morning. What Margaret had found by the end of that week was this. Someone had submitted a deed transfer application to the county recorder's office using a document that bore my signature. Not a signature I had given, a signature that had been copied, traced as far as the forensic document examiner could tell, from the closing paperwork of Papa Joe's estate, which Damon had been present for and had access to copies of. The title company was a legitimate company, not a fake, which meant someone had simply walked in with a forged document and started the process. The transfer hadn't completed. It required a second in-person notarization step that hadn't happened yet. They had scheduled that notarization appointment for 3 weeks from the date on the letter. Margaret looked at me across her desk and said, "You have two options. We can report this immediately to the sheriff's office and the district attorney, and the arrest happens before the appointment. Or," she paused, "we let them come to the appointment." I asked her what she meant. She said, "If we report now, they'll say it was a misunderstanding. Damon will claim he thought he had authority, that it was a miscommunication from the probate process, something. The forgery charge is real, but it's a first offense, and he has a decent shot at a plea that keeps him out of serious consequences. If we let them walk into that appointment," she folded her hands, "they walk into it knowing exactly what they're doing. Premeditated. On record. In front of a notary who will be expecting them, a sheriff's deputy who will be in the next room, and a camera that will have been running since they walked through the door. I thought about Papa Joe telling me that if something isn't level, everything built on top of it will fall. I told Margaret I'd think about it overnight. I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark and I thought about Damon teaching me to ride a bike in the parking lot of a church when I was 6 because he was 12 and thought he was old enough to be responsible for that. I thought about him showing up at my college graduation with flowers he'd clearly grabbed from a gas station and being so genuinely proud of me that it didn't matter. I thought about the $20,000 I'd never asked about because asking felt like an accusation. And then I thought about Papa Joe's handwriting on that will, shaky from his arthritis but deliberate, and I thought about my name at the bottom of a document I had never touched. In the morning, I called Margaret and told her to let them come to the appointment. The next 3 weeks were the strangest of my life. I didn't call Damon. I didn't call Renee. I went to work. I came home. I had dinner. I slept. Margaret coordinated with the county recorder's office, the title company, and the local sheriff's department. The notary who had been assigned to the appointment was briefed. A deputy agreed to be present in an administrative office adjacent to the signing room, door unlocked. The title company, to their enormous credit, was cooperative and mortified. The woman who managed their intake process told Margaret that the submitted document had looked legitimate. The signature matched, the notarization seal looked real on a surface inspection, and that they had no reason to question it. She said, "And I am not going to forget this. This is exactly why we have the in-person step." Yes, it is. I took the day off work on the appointment date. Margaret had asked if I wanted to be present. I said yes without hesitating. She arranged for me to wait in a small room down the hall, not the conference room where the signing would happen, but close enough. There was a monitor on the desk connected to the camera in the signing room. It was a Tuesday. It was raining. Damon and Renee arrived 7 minutes early. I watched them on the monitor. Renee was wearing a blazer I'd never seen before. Damon had a folder tucked under his arm. They were talking to each other when they walked in, relaxed, and Damon held the door for her and she said something and he laughed. They looked like people who were about to close on a house they were excited about, which, I suppose, is exactly what they thought they were doing. The notary, a calm, professional woman named Barbara, greeted them and offered them water. They declined. Renee set her bag on the table. Damon opened his folder and began spreading out documents. Barbara asked for their IDs, which they provided. She reviewed the deed transfer document. She asked Damon to confirm the property address. He confirmed it. She asked him to confirm his relationship to the original owner. He said he was the grandson and an heir. Barbara then said, very evenly, "And can you explain the basis for this transfer? The original will I have on file designates this property to a different heir." Damon said, "And I'm telling you this exactly as I later heard it from Margaret, who was in the room. There was a modification to the estate agreement. My sister signed off on a transfer of her interest. That's what's in the paperwork." Barbara looked at the document. She looked at Damon. She said, "I see. And your sister. Is she aware of this appointment today?" There was a pause. Then the door opened. I wasn't supposed to be the one to open it. That had not been part of the plan. The plan was that the deputy would enter from the side door after Barbara gave a signal. But I had been sitting in that small room for 40 minutes watching my brother smile and spread fake paperwork on a table. And when the moment came, I stood up and I walked down the hall and I opened the door myself. Damon looked up and the smile left his face so completely and so instantly that it was almost like watching a power outage. I didn't say anything dramatic. I had thought about what I might say for 3 weeks, and in the moment, I didn't say any of it. I just stood in the doorway and looked at him. Renee said, "Claire, this isn't what?" "Don't," I said. The deputy came through the side door 30 seconds later. What followed was not like television. There was no shouting. Damon didn't run. Renee started crying almost immediately. Not, I think, out of remorse, but out of the shock of being caught. which is a different thing entirely. Damon sat very still while the deputy explained the situation. He asked once if he could call someone, and the deputy said he'd have the opportunity to do that. They were both escorted out. Barbara, the notary, had been through a lot in her career apparently because she calmly gathered all the documents into an evidence envelope that Margaret had provided, labeled them, signed the label, and handed them to the deputy without being asked. Then she looked at me and said, "I'm sorry you had to deal with this." I thanked her. I didn't know what else to say. Margaret drove me home that afternoon because she didn't think I should be driving. I sat in her passenger seat and watched the rain on the window and felt something I still don't have a precise word for. Not satisfaction, exactly. Not grief, exactly. Something that lives between the two. I'll tell you what happened legally because I know that's what you want to know, and I know because the comment sections of stories like mine are always full of people asking and they deserve the actual answer instead of a vague wrap-up. Damon was charged with felony forgery of an instrument, felony uttering a forged instrument, and attempted obtaining property by false pretenses. Renee was charged with felony conspiracy to commit forgery and attempted obtaining property by false pretenses. In North Carolina, these are serious charges. The forensic document examiner's report was unambiguous. The signature was traced, the notary seal on the initial submission was counterfeit, and the timeline of document creation could be traced to a copy shop 2 miles from Damon and Renee's house, where they had a loyalty account. That last part, the loyalty account. I still think about that. Damon's attorney negotiated a plea. He received 3 years of supervised probation, 200 hours of community service, mandatory restitution for legal fees, and a felony conviction on his record. Renee's case went to trial because she refused the initial plea offer. She was convicted on both counts and sentenced to 18 months, with the possibility of parole at 12. She is currently serving that sentence. The house is mine. It has been mine the entire time. But now there is no ambiguity and no process outstanding and no letter from a title company waiting in any mailbox. Margaret filed the final paperwork in the fall. I went up to Asheville the weekend after everything was finalized. And I opened the workshop, and I stood in the middle of it for a long time. Papa Joe's tools are still there. He'd left them to Damon, technically, but Damon had never come to collect them. And now, given the circumstances, I don't think he will. I've been going up to Asheville on weekends. I've been repainting the front porch the color it was when I was a child. This particular shade of green that Papa Joe had chosen, and that had faded over the years. My neighbor there, an older woman named Dot, who knew my grandfather for 30 years, brought me a plate of biscuits the second weekend and sat with me on the porch steps and told me stories about him that I'd never heard. That was the afternoon I finally cried. I've had people ask me if I regret waiting. If I wish I'd reported Damon the moment I got the title company letter, instead of letting it go all the way to the appointment. And I understand the question. I understand why it looks complicated. But here's what I know. If I had reported it immediately, what would have happened is a misunderstanding, an honest mistake, a miscommunication about the estate process. Damon would have had every incentive to frame it that way, and every lawyer in the world would have helped him do it. What I did instead was let the truth become undeniable. I let them walk into a room where they had to perform the lie out loud, in front of witnesses, on camera, after being asked directly and choosing to proceed. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a choice. And they made it. The $20,000 I lent Damon is gone. I've accepted that. I don't expect to see it. What I have instead is a house on 2 acres in Asheville, with a wraparound porch and a workshop in the back, and a neighbor who brings biscuits and knew my grandfather when he was young. And I have the knowledge that I handled this the right way, not the easy way, not the fast way, but the way where the truth was so clear and so documented and so witnessed that there was nowhere for dishonesty to hide. Papa Joe built that house on a level foundation. He spent his life making sure the things he built wouldn't fall. I'm trying to do the same thing. There are days I miss my brother, not Damon as he turned out to be, but the version of him that held the bike and ran down the parking lot and let go and yelled, you're doing it, Claire!" before I even realized he wasn't holding on anymore. That person existed once. I don't know what happened to him. I burned the card he sent from County Holding before his sentencing. I didn't read it. I stood over my kitchen sink and held a lighter to the corner and watched it go. My therapist says that was a reasonable choice. I think it was the only one I could make and still walk out of my own kitchen feeling like myself. The porch is almost done. 2 more weekends, maybe 3. I think Papa Joe would like the color.